Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Stavrula Hadzios, and I'm an associate professor in the Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology department here at Yale, as well as the Department of Chemistry. And more importantly, I'm a member of the Microbial Sciences Institute, which is the focus of our webinar today. So before we get into the discussion, I just want to give two quick announcements. The first is that, as you can probably tell, Andy Goodman, who's the director of the Institute, is not able to be with us today due to a family emergency, so I'm filling in for him as moderator. But fortunately, we have a great group of panelists with us who'll be able to field a number of your questions today. So I'm going to go ahead and ask them to introduce themselves. We'll start with Huoliang Pi.
My name is Huoliang Pi. I'm an assistant professor at the Department of Microbial Pathogenesis and also part of the Microbial Sciences Institute. This is my very beginning of my second year here. So, very new.
And how about Wei next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Hu. I joined the Immunobiology department last year in February. My lab is part of the Institute of Biomolecular Design and Discovery, which is located on the Yale West campus.
And finally, we have Maria.
Hi, hello, I'm Maria Rodriguez. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Biomedical Informatics and Data Science. I just joined in May, so I'm recently appointed here at Yale, and I moved from the industry. So if some of you are from the industry, have specific questions, I would be happy to address them.
Fantastic. So thank you all for joining us. And thanks to everyone who's logged into the webinar. We're really eager to hear your questions and to provide whatever help that we can through the application process. So first, I want to begin with just generally an overview of how these positions are structured and their relationship to Yale, the broader community here, as well as the Institute. So as you probably heard from the introductions, myself and Huoliang are both currently members of the Microbial Sciences Institute, which is coordinating these two searches with two different departments at Yale: immunobiology, of which Wei Hu is a member, and then also biomedical informatics and data science, which Maria is a member of. So the Microbial Sciences Institute is one of 7 interdisciplinary institutes that are housed on Yale's West Campus, which is one of the 3 key campuses at Yale. So there's the main campus, the central campus, which houses all the undergraduates and the teaching initiatives, as well as a lot of our research labs as well. And then there's the medical school campus, which is about a mile removed from the main campus. And then we have the West Campus, which is about 7 miles from the main campus. So it's a short drive. And this particular campus, as I mentioned, is comprised of these 7 institutes. It's primarily focused on graduate research, postdocs, higher level research initiatives as opposed to undergraduate education, but a lot of undergrads do also come out here and work in the labs. So the 7 institutes span a variety of different scientific disciplines, as well as art, which is really cool to have humanists out here on this campus as well. And we also have the School of Nursing nearby. Within the Microbial Sciences Institute, we have a collective of different research labs, currently 7, that are focused on exploring different approaches of fundamental science to studies of microbial interactions with each other, with the host, with the environment, how these communities are structured, how they shape disease, etc. So it's a really interesting and thought-provoking community in terms of collaboration and the questions that we pursue and the techniques that we use as well. And I think there's a similar spirit in terms of how the other institutes operate, like the institute that Wei is a part of, Institute for Biomolecular Discovery and Design. These institutes are housed very close together, and sometimes they share the same building. Upstairs from us is the Cancer Biology Institute, for example, and Wei's institute is right next to us. So this also fosters a lot of cross-disciplinary interactions with scientists at other institutes. And in fact, Wei and I collaborate pretty heavily together right now. So that's been great for us. Okay, so that's a general overview to the institute structure. Let me give you a little bit more information about the particular positions that we are currently searching for. So you can have a sense of how these appointments are set up at the university. So for both of these positions, one of which is with immunobiology and the other with BIDS, the primary appointment of the candidate coming in would be with the department. So that means that you are primarily affiliated, for example, with Yale Immunobiology or BIDS. So that means that your tenure and promotion process would go through that home department. Any teaching obligations that you have would be through that department, as well as service obligations. The grant administration, like interactions with the business office, would be through the department, as well as human resources. Basically, all aspects that come with being a primary appointee in a department are affiliated with you as being a member of that department, even though your lab is physically housed on the West Campus. So the second part of the appointment is that while all of it moves through the main department, your physical space is on the West Campus in the Institute, and that gives you a really great opportunity to be interacting with colleagues who are kind of similarly enthusiastic about microbial research as it relates to, in the case of one of the searches, computational microbiology, as well as microbe-immune interactions. You have opportunities for collaboration and pushing your research program forward in new directions, building off the other science that's going on in the Institute. So the main aspect of the appointment is that, again, all of the primary functional infrastructure in terms of tenure and promotion, service, teaching, all of that is dictated sort of by the primary department, but then you and your research program are housed on the West Campus, and that affords a lot of access to cutting edge resources, instrumentation, collaboration that's out here. And we can talk more about that if you have questions specific to those aspects. So I think what I might do is pause there so that we can start some actual Q&A. We can also provide more information as helpful. One last thing I'll add is that if you do have questions that are specific to your research, like would my project be a good fit for one of these searches, I would ask that you email our director, Andy Goodman, directly with those questions, because he's best positioned to answer those questions. But otherwise, we're happy to answer any other inquiries that you may have. And I encourage you to put those into the chat, and I will try to direct them to the relevant panelists or to myself as necessary. So we'll just see if anyone is brave enough to ask the first question. And if not, maybe I will open the floor to see if anyone else wants to chime in with additional comments on the institutes or the positions as they're currently structured. Nope. If not, then I will jump in and then I guess just give you some additional general information about the searches. So the two searches, again, these are for positions with biomedical informatics and data science, as well as Yale Immunobiology. And the search is being conducted by two independent search committees that are joint between the department and the Institute. If you as an applicant feel like your program could potentially be a good fit for either of the searches, then we would encourage you to apply for both. Also, I would say, just from my experience applying for jobs, if you're not sure about whether to apply for the position generally, because you're not sure about the amount of overlap with the written, ad, I would also encourage you to apply, because you never know, even if you think that there's a small amount of overlap, you're never quite sure like how that might fit into any given institute. So I would err on the side of applying. But again, you can email Andy if you have specific questions. So I'm seeing some questions come in now, so we'll start answering those directly. What is the teaching load at the respective departments? These are both med school affiliated positions. So I'll start with that, but then I'm going to turn over the specific questions first to Wei for immunobiology and then Maria for BIDS. So Wei, yeah.
So I go first.
Mm-hmm.
So the teaching load in iBio is very, very light, and it's entirely optional. So they encourage junior faculties to teach classes mainly because it's a good opportunity to recruit students, and you might get more exposure to the undergraduate students, which can be very helpful in your lab. So currently I'm teaching one class in what we call Introduction to Research, iBio 600. which is basically you sitting with the first-year graduate students and telling them about your lab as a way to recruit potential students to rotate. And then there are two other classes that junior faculties tend to teach more. One is biology of the immune system. So it's run by two lecture directors, and they invite different faculty members to teach 1 or 2 lectures on their specialty. So I'm currently teaching 2 classes, so it's very, very light. If you have the capacity or bandwidth to do more, you could take on 2 more lectures in advanced topics in immunology. So it's basically organized based on, you can talk about whatever you want. The first lecture is a knowledge-based lecture, 60 minutes. And then the second one is usually a literature discussion, but it can be any topic of your choice. That's pretty much it when it comes to teaching. And you only take on more teaching when you move to the more advanced positions. But that won't happen for a while.
Okay, and with respect to BITS, BITS is a biomedical informatics and data science. The teaching load is also relatively low. So we have to teach 1 course per year, so 1 semester course per year. So that means that you only teach 1 semester. And of course, if this is for faculty that are 100% affiliated with BITS. If you have this dual appointment we are discussing in these searches, then you will have only 50% of the requirements. That means that you will have to co-teach, so 50% of a course with another faculty from BITS or another department. And typically there is flexibility of preparing a new course that of course has to fit the themes of the department, which is data science, bioinformatics, medical informatics. But the application is you can define it according to your interest and your expertise. So it's also low and relatively flexible.
Thank you. So I'm going to go on to the next question, which is, for the selected candidates, would you organize a symposium like for the other search? So this is still being decided, so I don't have a final answer for you. It is true that in the past, a lot of our searches through MSI have operated with a symposium-like structure for the interviews, but that has not always been the case, and it often depends on the preference of the partnering department. So I don't think we have a final answer on that yet. It could go either way. I was wondering if you could speak on the structure for support of junior faculty. Are there formal committees, assistance with grant writing, mentoring, etc.? Thank you. So I'll speak very briefly about mentoring within the Institute, and maybe Hualiang could also comment on that, and then I'll turn it over to Wei and Maria, who can provide more information specific to the departments that we're partnering with on this search. So I'm sort of early mid-career in MSI. I'm associate professor, and so I've been here for the early years of my tenure track appointment, and I can say that one tremendous asset of being affiliated with MSI is the incredible amount of mentoring that I received as a member of the Institute, which I feel really lucky to have received. Our director, Andy Goodman, values mentorship, I think, very, very highly, and he does make a lot of time to interact with the junior members of the Institute in a number of different ways. So one-on-one meetings is needed, going to lunch periodically just to catch up both on life and progress in the lab, problems that may be arising, grant writing, etc. More formal meetings to kind of discuss grant opportunities, grant structure, feedback on grants or managerial issues. He serves as a really excellent liaison between the Institute and the home department. So while the tenure and promotion decisions go through the home department, the Institute director at West Campus does have a lot of say in terms of input and progress of the candidate, and directly connects with the department and the committees in that regard. So Andy serves as a strong advocate in that aspect as well. And we also have some other formal mechanisms within our Institute that help support mentoring. So the faculty of the Institute have roughly like once every 2 months, a meeting where we all get together and do a research in progress, where one of us will present a grant idea or some big talk that's coming up to get feedback from the rest of the group. We have faculty meetings roughly quarterly where we can also discuss aspects related to professional development or support. And then of course, there are a lot of other formal mechanisms, like we have our own external and internal seminar series, our own annual retreat, also financial support for both all types of trainees within our labs to go attend various conferences. So anyway, in addition to Andy, we have other senior staff and senior faculty members as well within the Institute, like Jun Liu, who's been really great as well in terms of offering mentoring support and guidance. So I'll pause there, but I would say again, I think that's like a huge asset to these positions in the Institute, and I'm going to turn it over to Huoyang to see if she has anything to add.
Yeah, I totally agree with Stavroula. So because I'm a part of MSI as well as microbial pathogenesis, and Andy Goodman is actually the chair of their department. And he's not on my committee, but I get a lot of guidance from him and other faculty from the MSI, including Stavroula and Jun Liu, as Stavroula just mentioned. And each, I think, like we have like MSI, we have a seminar. I mean, that's something I should add on. Like we do have a seminar series just specific for MSI. So we have talks from trainees and postdocs from MSI, as well as we invite seminar like international speakers from different institutes invite over to. We have the seminar series here at MSI, and my home department, I do have a mentoring committee. So I don't know if anything else. I think that's pretty much everything, right? And we do have also, besides the seminar series, we also have the retreat. And this year I'm on the planning committee, so we plan the retreat outside of West Campus once a year.
So Wei, are there additional mechanisms that you could speak to, maybe in immunobiology?
Yes, so like microbial pathogenesis, we also have a formal mentoring committee. It's composed of 3 senior faculty members. We meet once a year, and then after we turn in the form, we meet with the chair again just to catch up. And they're very, very helpful, very generous with their time. But that's not the only mentoring opportunity we have. The department is very collegial. You can basically approach anybody if you have questions that you think they're best to answer. I've approached numerous people on all sorts of weird questions, and even the senior lab managers in the department, they are always willing to help. And then on top of the formal mentoring committee, we also have a monthly, I wouldn't call it faculty meeting. It's independent of the faculty meeting. We alternate between what we call a faculty science forum versus grant discussion forum. So in a grant discussion, it's focused on structuring one's grant. So it usually involves someone presenting the idea of a grant and people growing them. And it ends with, people taking off or adding on or restructure the proposal. So that's been very helpful for me. And alternatively, you could present what we call a faculty science. So that's usually early work in progress. So you want people's immediate feedback on something that hasn't fully matured yet. So those are also very helpful. And I just want to mention that the senior administrators in the business office, they are also very helpful mentors when it comes to managerial duties and just the business side of this job. So they're also a great asset. So the mentoring doesn't only exist in the form of the mentoring committee.
Okay. I can add a few words about BITS. So we also have, well, the department, BITS as a department is quite young, so we are still creating many of these structures, but we already have a monthly faculty lunch where we get together and talk about various issues. Also, because the department is still relatively small, there is a very good interaction with across all faculties, and it's very easy to just approach people to ask all sort of questions. Regarding grant training, actually, that was also highly relevant for me because I joined in 5 months ago, and I came from Europe, Switzerland. So I had experience writing European grants, but not so much with NIH. So something I found very helpful is there is a course organized by our chair for grant writing, specifically focused to NIH grant writing. And this course is hands-on. So basically, this year it started in September and it will run until January. And the idea is to have something ready to submit in the February deadline. And this course we are looking at applications that everybody's writing. So every week you have to create one section: significance, innovation, first aim, etc. And it's been reviewed by the chair of the department. You have a teaching assistant and also among ourselves. So for me, it has been super useful to understand NIH funding structure and to understand how to structure things here. And I'm sure that it could be useful for you if you are here.
That's great. Thank you guys for your feedback. So there was a related question, which I think we addressed most of, about workshops. And I think the grant writing that you all mentioned really addresses that. I'll just add that I know that throughout the university, on West Campus, but also in different divisions like the School of Medicine, which these two positions would be affiliated with, the Dean's Office also organizes different workshops that are targeted towards junior faculty in terms of lab management, for example, and leadership at various times throughout the year that people can apply for and participate in. And I've done several of those through the main campus Dean's Office, which my affiliation is with, but the School of Medicine offers that as well. Okay, next, there's a question about the computational position. Would this position provide wet lab space or only offices for computational work? So as I mentioned before, the physical space for this position would be on the West Campus in the Microbial Sciences Institute. This is a question I think would be best answered by Andy Goodman, so I would encourage you to email the director directly. But I would say that we have recently hired faculty who do mixed wet and dry lab work, and you know, it's just generally dependent on the nature of your research program. So I would encourage you to email him directly to ask. Okay, could you talk about extramural funding expectation? For example, at least one R01. I'm assuming that that question is meaning for promotion potentially. I guess I will turn this over to maybe Wei and Maria again. My understanding is that there's not like a hard and fast rule about numbers, but let me see what they have to say.
So I'm obviously still at a very early stage of my career, but my impression of the iBio department is that it doesn't really go by expectation. You just need at least one R01 plus some other money to be able to run a lab. On paper, they will say you have to have at least one R01 to get tenure, but in reality, you need more than that. That's been my general impression. They just want to make the hard rule looser, just so that there's more room for interpretation.
Yes, and that's my perception here. So again, our department is very, very young and nobody has been presented for promotion yet. But I agree with what we have just said. So at least you need an R01. Additional money from other institutions, foundation, etc., is of course welcome and very much needed. And typically, if you can get more than a one R01, is certainly well perceived and it will be beneficial for your lab. So yes, while nothing is written on hard on stone, the reality is that yes, typically you will need probably more than one.
Thank you. There's a question about the computational position. Is it needed to support computational analyses of other groups in the department? So I would say the answer to that is no. We certainly would hope that anyone coming in either of these positions would be very open to collaborating with as many groups as possible within our institute and other institutes on the West Campus and at Yale, because that's kind of the mission of these institutes out on the West Campus, is to foster interdisciplinary collaboration. And of course, we recognize the increasing value of, computational microbiology as an emerging discipline, and are really eager to welcome someone with that expertise, both into our institute as well as into BEADS. It's pronounced BEADS. Sorry, I keep saying BID. It's BEADS. I like that better, BEADS. So yeah, I just want to clarify, this is not a position where we're hiring someone to just kind of serve as a core for the institute and perform our bioinformatics. That's definitely not what this is. The person will be expected to, you know, have a vision, run and maintain their own independent, vibrant research program. And the added benefit to us, hopefully, would be like very fruitful conversations, interactions, and collaborations. So I hope that answers that question. Sorry, I just lost my spot, so let me find it again. Okay, you mentioned earlier that the tenure process will depend on the department. Oops, keeps hopping around. Sorry, that the department would be the applicant would be affiliated. Let me start over. You mentioned earlier that the tenure process will depend on the department the applicant would be affiliated with. What's the pressure to publish in certain journals that shall not be named or get funding to cross the line? And is there a specific time frame for this? Thank you. So this is another question about expectations for tenure. And I would echo prior feedback from the panelists that, I mean, maybe there are some general written rules, but not really. I think it's kind of dependent on the candidate and the process for the different departments. I'm going to let you guys comment on that more specifically, and then I'll also add something to the chat, which might be helpful, but go ahead. Maybe Wei, sorry.
Oh, so officially the iBio tenure clock is 10 years. The expectation, there is very little written expectation, but from what we can see from the examples we can see in the recent years, the unspoken bar seems to be widespread recognition in the field. So they want to see people, yeah, I mean, publication is part of it, but it doesn't mean, oh, you must publish in the journals that shall not be named to get promotion. It is more important to have a nice, solid body of work that build up through the years that people in the field appreciate. They value more when they see that you get invited to speak at conferences, you get citations, you're casting real impact on the field. In terms of grants, I mean, grants and publications are sort of intertwined because unless you're publishing well, you can't get sufficient number of grants. But again, there's no hard requirement. The hard requirement is one must have at least one R01. And then the rest sort of depends on the specific case because everybody's program is different.
Maria, do you have anything to add? If not, that's okay, but.
Actually, what Wei said also applies to BITS. I have not heard any requirement in terms of journals. And in our case, our department, some people do medical informatics, some people do computational biology, some people do cryptography. So certainly there's no expectation one single journal that you need to get a publication there. But as Wei has said very nicely, you need to have recognition in your field. And this is through invitations to speak, it's through publications, citations, grants. So what is value is the recognition.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I would add that a lot of journals and things are field specific and mechanisms for recognition can be field specific. So that will also influence that process. I am going to add, as I mentioned, a link to the chat. Just if people want more information, this is a link that is a publicly available link through the Yale School of Medicine that has information on the tenure process and sort of benchmarks that kind of Wei referred to in terms of what the School of Medicine wants to see in terms of recognition. There's like general language that's used to sort of characterize that so that you can look through that in more detail. It specifies the timelines and has more useful information with regards to those questions. Okay, I'm going to try to scroll back to where we are here. Are there TC rooms, tissue culture rooms, available at the MSI? Yes, there are. There's in fact a tissue culture suite that is kind of dedicated for joint use by different labs at MSI who have evolving needs in tissue culture, and then other labs like my own who do extensive tissue culture work have dedicated facilities for tissue culture, but there's definitely several active tissue culture facilities in the Institute. Okay, this is probably going to be a question for my med school colleagues here. Being a school of medicine, does the department structure its salary, for example, as a 9+3 position? I think that's 9 months plus 3 months, or are tenure track faculty expected to fully fund themselves as they cycle off of their startup package? So I think maybe we can answer that briefly. I'll let maybe Hualiang, do you want to, for School of Medicine?
Yeah, sure. So for my position, I think it's not a 9+3 position because it's a medical school affiliated. And if you don't come in with the funding, then your startup would cover your first 3 years of your salary. That's included in the startup package. Of course, if you have funding from first year, and you can, redistribute the money, then you can save up some of the startup. And as I understand, the startup doesn't expire forever. So it with you as long as you have any. And after 3 years, then after 3 years before you get a tenured, and I think you are supposed to cover 50%. After you get tenured, I think the number varies based on your title. And some faculty needs to cover 70%, some faculty, if they have a title, then would be, I don't know exact number, but it'd be between 50 and 70%.
Okay, thanks. So this additional questions from this person regarding whether these positions are exclusive for first-time assistant professors or open to those recently promoted assistant professors who are looking to transfer. I think that question is probably worth an email to Andy, but my understanding is that it's open to anyone who wants to apply at this level. So that would include people who were recently promoted to assistant professors elsewhere and want to reapply here. How much weight is placed on having existing funding? It's definitely not necessary. I think some applicants come in with funding, some do not. So it's just one component of many that we look at in the candidate's credentials and overall application. Can you please talk about the technical support, such as access to biosamples, core services like sequencing, etc.? Thank you. I will provide some info on this and then see if others have other info to contribute, maybe specific to the med school as well. So I think this is another tremendous strength of the West Campus. I would argue, hopefully not controversially, that the majority of sort of the cutting edge cores at Yale are located on the West Campus. So our Center for Genome Analysis, which is the core that everybody uses for both at Yale and beyond, a lot of other institutions send their samples here for high throughput sequencing, is like a 5-minute walk from my lab. It's like the building just down the way from us here in MSI. We have a really fantastic analytical core that's used really heavily by my lab and many others across the campus, where you have sort of walk-on access to various mass spectrometers, NMR spectroscopy equipment, a variety of different things for small molecule analyses. We have a cryo-EM here that is used very heavily for various structural analyses by members of our institute and elsewhere on campus. There's also a small molecule discovery center, state-of-the-art animal facilities. There are a lot of other facilities for material science applications, like there's a big clean room facility for fabrication of nanodevices. So all these things are on the West Campus, and the university has invested a lot of resources in developing these and other facilities here. So you have, I think, unparalleled access to these resources as a member of the Institute. And then there are several other technical support services available through the School of Medicine and other corners of campus that are open to you as well. Does anyone have anything they want to contribute in terms of additional resources not on the West Campus?
I think besides the clean room, there's a TEM core facility as well.
So I guess one other thing that I thought of that I would add, because the person asked specifically about biosamples. So the the medical school and the university at large has a lot of close affiliations with Yale New Haven Hospital, which is, I think, the leading hospital in Connecticut. It's a fantastic facility, and also Smilow Cancer Center is here. And the university has the Yale Cancer Center, of which many of us are affiliated with, that has a lot of different divisions that support innovative research into various areas of cancer biology. And that really facilitates partnerships with clinicians at Yale New Haven Hospital and can provide access to a number of really impactful biosamples, ranging from, fecal samples if you do microbiome work, various tumor specimens, primary cells if you're going to do organoid culture models. These are things that our lab and others have employed throughout our research program. So I think the close connections to the clinical centers in New Haven via the university are a really phenomenal resource. Is the computational biology position to be expected to be computational only? What if my research program would be half computational and half wet lab? So we had a related question earlier that in my opinion, that should be fine. But I would direct that question more towards Andy. And I don't know if Maria, if you have any more insight into that.
My understanding was also that this is a mixed position. So certainly at BITS, there is no wet lab facilities. People that are fully affiliated with this department, 100% appointment at BITS, are not doing any wet biology. But this is a joint search. So I would imagine that the discussions can be held about the percentage having computational and wet lab facility research. But I agree that probably Andy is in a better position to answer these questions.
Yeah, so I would definitely direct that question to Andy via email, and he'll be able to give you the most accurate answer. Let me just make sure I didn't miss any questions, or if others have questions that they haven't yet been brave enough to ask, please feel free. It's a welcoming environment here in the Q&A. And if not, I can give you some other maybe tidbits on. Yeah, I think we got most of them. Hopefully we didn't miss any. If not, please bump it back up to the bottom of the chat. So I guess I can comment a little bit more on environment, both scientific and otherwise, in terms of being at Yale and more broadly in New Haven and Connecticut. So we commented about there being these 3 different campuses and these positions being unique in both their interdisciplinary structure and co-affiliation with the primary department. Again, that's your primary appointment. And that's where kind of all your world sort of centers around financially, et cetera. But then you have the operational structure of the Institute, which really fosters, at least for me, I think, really cool avenues of research. And it has been a real asset to the growth of our research program. So you have sort of that embedded collaborative and interdisciplinary structure that's born out of how these appointments are set up. And also the general infrastructure and space here on the West Campus. But then you have all these other opportunities to interact with other sort of supergroup structures across the campus. So for example, in the area of microbiology, we have active research initiatives across all 3 corners of campus in the form of microbial pathogenesis, which is Paul Young's primary department at the medical school, the Microbial Sciences Institute here on the West Campus. And then on Central Campus, there are a lot of active groups focusing on different aspects of microbiology and physiology in the Quantitative Biology Institute, Ecology and Evolutionary Biology Department. So there are a lot of different stakeholders in these broader conceptual structures at Yale, and we all kind of collaborate and integrate across different seminars and things like that. So that's another really important aspect of these positions, which helps you expand the reach of your research program. In terms of Connecticut at large, so, faculty live kind of, I'm kind of curious to hear where everybody here lives, but people sort of live either, in New Haven or surrounding communities. And New Haven itself, I live in New Haven, is a really vibrant community, and I really enjoyed living there because my appointment is with one of the Central Campus departments, so I do teach the undergrads, interact with them a lot, and it's really nice, even just walking through the campus and being part of that collegial community spirit. The city itself is, I think, a really wonderful place to live. I mean, you have access to phenomenal diversity of restaurant options and then also cultural options that are brought in by virtue of the university. Like there's a wonderful drama school and then musical performances throughout the year. And the students are always putting on different shows and performances that you can attend as well. And I guess, do you guys, and also, you know, easy proximity to a lot of other major metropolitan areas along the Northeast corridor through the train system and otherwise. Are there other things that you guys want to comment on, either about your experience within the environment at Yale or in Connecticut?
No.
Nope, I hit it all. Okay.
Well, unless anybody want to know about living in Orange, I can contribute to that.
So Orange is the part of Connecticut, the town that the West Campus is actually located in. I guess one asset here, Wei, is that we have all there's this large road nearby that has just like all
Yeah, I was gonna mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason I chose to live in Orange is because there's one road that literally has everything. It has a Costco, it has a Trader Joe's, it has Whole Foods, it has anything you can think of, any chain. So I chose to live Orange for close proximity to those things. It's also very close to the lab space. We're buying a house. We're closing in 2 weeks.
Oh,
That's
congrats.
also in Orange. So Orange has great school zone, a very safe environment, no risk for flooding, and just in general, very beautiful.
I live there too.
You know, I'll also add, since Wei mentioned the schools, that work-life support is, I think, quite good here. There was a big movement many years ago to help sort of facilitate and improve some of the daycare structures affiliated with the university. So my family has had great support through one of the daycare centers affiliated with Yale in the New Haven campus. The West Campus, where we are, has a Bright Horizons daycare center, which I've also used when my normal daycare center is closed, and then brought my kids there, and that's fantastic. And a lot of the faculty here use it, and postdocs as well. So that's been a tremendous resource. There's several different centers throughout New Haven and the surrounding communities, so I thought I would just add that. And let me just check in with some questions here because some others came in. So we have a question about whether the departments are open to cross-border grant opportunities, like between the EU and the US, considering the differences in overhead allocated depending on the funding body. Maria, I wonder if you have any knowledge of this.
Yes, so I actually came recently from Switzerland. I brought some funding from there. So obviously the overhead in Europe in general is smaller. It ranges from 15%, 25%. So there is an additional, the Yale's grants office had no problem whatsoever to accept this funding. You just have to justify that the overhead rate is lower. And they just want to, the process was simple. I just have to provide a web page where it was stated that that's the overhead. So it's not negotiable. And that was simple. There are also international grants. For instance, the European Commission, if you're working on the health domain, the European Commission has a very ambitious research program. It's called Horizon Europe. And the calls specific for health programs are open to US participants. So if you want to explore that option, this is something that you are very welcome to do. And in general, yes, there's no one to get these grants and these awards, you can bring them to Yale, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, and I know a lot of our faculty have support from various foreign organizations like the Human Frontier Science Program, Burroughs Wellcome Trust, things of that nature, depending on if they're set up to be sort of foreign collaborative funding opportunities. Okay, so now we have a question about the weather. I love weather questions. So how is the weather? Okay, I'm biased. I love the weather here. We're in the best part of the season right now. New England is maybe just locally, I don't know, broadly famous for its beautiful fall foliage. I think the weather here in the fall is great. Like where the corridor here, like even just driving around the little hamlets around the coast of Connecticut and then up New England, the leaves all turn and it's beautiful and it's like crisp fall weather. You have a little bit of rain, but not too bad, right, guys? I mean, I guess it's pretty, I don't know. I really love the fall. So you asked this question at the perfect time for me, but it's nice because we have very seasonal weather here. So we have very distinct seasons, I would say. So we're in fall, and then it'll transition to winter. Here, the winter is not too bad. We usually, the last couple winters have been a little bit mild, climate change, I guess, but we have some snowfall every year, which is nice. And the winter always lasts a little longer than maybe some would like, and then we have a pretty nice spring and hot summer. Anyone want to comment on their experience coming from other places to the weather here in New Haven?
I mean, coming from Switzerland, the weather here is quite nice and pleasant, so I have nothing to complain about. And I agree, the foliage is absolutely gorgeous and beautiful.
I love the fall in New Haven and Orange. I don't know how good of a job they do at cleaning the snow, because it didn't really happen in the last winter. But I was advised by everybody to get an all-wheel drive car.
Yes, that is a very hot tip. To get an all-wheel drive vehicle. I did as well. And I guess one other thing I'll mention about the local environment, which is also germane to MSI. So the Microbial Sciences Institute, part of the community building that we do is we have periodic socials. In the past, they've taken the form of lunches. We have a communal break room. So the labs are sort of oriented in this L-like structure, and the communal break room is where these two ends meet. So it's a natural point for all the different people in the different labs to come together for coffee and lunch, so people hang out across different labs. And then we occasionally will have like institute hosted luncheons for everybody to get together and different activities. And more recently, what we've instituted is each lab sort of hosting a different social event. And they've been things like bowling, duck pin bowling, and a game night at a local center where everybody goes and plays board games. And my lab is hosting the next one, which is apple picking. So there are a ton of different orchards around here that people can go to and pick apples and get cider donuts and things like that, which is another highlight of the fall. So I thought I'd plug that as well, both relevance to the Institute and the local environment. And then there was a question about childcare that we covered somewhat. I'm wondering if there's anything further I should add about that. I mean, the different locales, as was sort of touched on earlier, vary a bit in terms of the schools. So that's something that you would want to research in terms of like your family, how old your kids are, whether you want them to go to public or private school, local taxes. I mean, this is true of anywhere you would move, probably anywhere in the world. But I would say there are pros and cons to the different communities around the area. Some have, like New Haven, for example, you have walkability to kind of most things. You can walk downtown, you can go to the restaurants, the university's there. A lot of the students live there. It's a really vibrant space. But I would say the public schools are maybe not as strong as some of the surrounding communities. So a lot of faculty opt to live in more of the suburbs or areas maybe closer to West Campus if they're affiliated with one of the institutes out here, because the schools, as Wei mentioned earlier, are really fantastic. A lot of the public schools in the surrounding areas. And maybe your dollar will go a bit farther in terms of the house you can buy and relative taxes and things of that nature. I think we've covered the questions thus far. Are there any other topics that maybe for the panelists that you think would be helpful for the candidates to know?
Oh, since Maria,
Go ahead, please.
Oh, I just have one very quick comment about the flow cytometry facility on the West Campus, because I think it matters a lot for immunologists. So the West Campus has a very up-to-date flow facility. We have a 5-laser Aurora spectral analyzer. We have one BD Symphony cell sorter. We have one BD Aria cell sorter, and we have an Attune, which has acoustic assisted focusing, so you can run samples at a very high speed. And we're in the process of acquiring a Namocell Parla cell dispenser for single cell cloning and single cell biology. And all of the sorters are user operated, so you can use them outside of regular business hours. So that adds a lot of flexibility if you're working with rare cells or time-sensitive experiments.
Okay. And maybe what I can add in terms of computational resources is there is a strong push at Yale to build the skills in AI and data science. So if this is your area of research, this is a good place to be. The computational infrastructure, there are some existing clusters, some of them for sensitive data, some of them for non-sensitive data. They are getting upgraded. So now there's under discussion the new cluster that will harbor H1 GPU nodes will start working in 2025. So with that, we are hoping to really get much stronger computational facilities, which if you are doing computer science and data science is good to have here.
So a couple more questions have come in, so I'm just going to read those out. There's a question about what is the turnaround time for the first round of interviews from application submission? I can't give you a very clear answer on that because it will depend on the search and the schedules of the faculty on the search committees and how the interviews will be structured, be it symposium or sort of each candidate coming at one time. And I think Andy would be the best person to inquire about those questions. But I think it's quite likely that the earliest interviews would be early next year. It's possible there might be some at the very end of the year, but most likely I would program that for early spring. How women-friendly is the environment both for faculty and students? Are there lactation rooms? What is the time allowed for maternity leave? These are excellent questions. So I will maybe answer some of these first. So I've had 2 kids since starting my position here, so both pre-tenure. How women-friendly is the environment? So I would say that it's been overall very positive. I mean, I think the West Campus has fewer women faculty than our complementary components across the other 2 campuses in some respects, but I think our institute is actually 50-50 now. Is that right, Huang? Which is great. You know, I as a female faculty member have felt really well supported. As I said, especially by Andy, I've received a lot of fantastic mentoring and also from my home department. So I haven't felt that to be an issue. And I think the same for students. I don't know the exact numbers, but at least in MSI, I think it's close to 50-50 if I had to guess. Paul Young, I'm not sure, but I think that does that sound right to you? I think that the students feel fairly well supported. We periodically do town hall meetings as well as climate surveys within our institute just to get a sense of how the trainees are feeling. And generally the responses there have been quite positive in terms of overall support and mechanisms for the trainees. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of formal structure embedded in the institute specifically to support our trainees, including both, you know, our own seminar series, annual retreat, which Hualiang is organizing for the entire institute, a separate retreat once every 3 years for postdocs and more senior scientists to help them with career opportunities like planning for interviewing, different job opportunities. That was a really successful event that we're going to be planning again soon. And then the Institute also provides financial support to all trainees to attend conferences. There's some funds set aside for that, in addition to kind of the social events that I mentioned earlier to help build community here within the Institute. Oh, and we have a Slack, which is very active with many channels, including wildlife sightings at MSI, which is another feature of the campus. We have a lot of coyotes and geese and turkeys and all sorts of things that are spotted. I digress. Okay. Are there lactation rooms? There are lactation rooms. So I would say that as a faculty member, you know, one advantage is probably that you have your own office. So, you know, I just pumped in my own office and you can create privacy with a blind or whatever that you need. And for the trainees, which is also certainly a priority, we have dedicated lactation rooms in the conference center. And I think there may be 1 or 2 others. And sometimes institutes also set aside space for that. We've set aside space, for example, in our institute for a dedicated Zoom room so that trainees have access to those resources as well. And in terms of time allowed for maternity leave, that varies a little bit depending on your appointment and the structure of, you know, the formal, you know, handbook guidelines. But honestly, as a faculty member, I think it's kind of up to you. I'm trying to remember how much time I took, but I took quite a bit for each kid. I mean, the nice thing now is that you can work remotely if you need to. So you can set up Zoom meetings and work from home later on, or you can take the full time. What I would say from my appointment, which again is not with the School of Medicine, it's the different division at the university. You don't need to apply like for a formal leave. You just take the time as long as you are nominally still working, and then there's something called teaching relief that you can get. Does anyone else have any insights into this process? If not, that's okay. So my experience was positive. I felt well supported by the community and was able to set up the infrastructure that I needed in order to pump and also take care of my kids and have daycare support and that. And if people do have more specific questions, you should feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions about being a working mom at Yale. Okay, how easy is it to recruit students from diverse backgrounds, like engineers and computer scientists and biologists and chemists? Is it possible to teach in different departments or interact with different departments to facilitate this? I can certainly answer this, but I also want to open it up if other people have insights into recruiting students from diverse backgrounds, scientifically and otherwise, and whether it's possible to teach in other departments. Okay, I'll tell you what my experience is, and then it may inspire some other answers. So I would say that I think it's fairly doable. Like for me, it's been quite straightforward for a couple of reasons, and I think many of which are facilitated by being on the West Campus in MSI, because again, it's designed to be a very interdisciplinary research home by nature. And so a lot of students are attracted to the campus and to the labs here because the work is so interdisciplinary, which means that you're drawing students often from different organizational divisions within the graduate program. So you can affiliate with different tracks within what's called the Biological and Biomedical Sciences umbrella program at Yale. And then different departments will have their own graduate programs, and there's some other sort of interdepartmental programs like the neuroscience program that you can also affiliate with. It just depends on the nature of your research, and oftentimes you have to kind of apply as a faculty member to become a part of a specific track or otherwise. But often, I think most of the people here, and including these two positions that one would be entering in, you would be automatically affiliated with a track in the BBS program, and often you can opt to get affiliated with a second track. So that means that, for example, in my case, I'm affiliated with this quantitative biology, biochemistry track, as well as the microbiology track, which is another one. And then there's also this big, what we call the mega track, molecular cellular genes and development program. Because I'm also formally affiliated with the Department of Chemistry, which has its own graduate program, I can draw students from the chemistry department. So my lab is highly interdisciplinary with students from chemistry, biology, microbiology, and I don't think that that is an anomaly. I think a lot of our faculty, for example, in MSI, have backgrounds in physics, and some have formal affiliations with those departments, and so they can also draw students from biochemistry, physics, microbiology. And I think that's actually essential for the success of our research program. So some of this has been set up to foster that. In terms of teaching, you can probably teach, they're always looking for people to teach these group courses at the med school and elsewhere as much as you want. So if you want exposure, you can certainly, for example, probably volunteer to teach a course in one of the microbial pathogenesis courses. Of course, if your work is germane to the broader topic of bacterial pathogenesis, or there are other specialty topic courses for the graduate program where you can volunteer as a guest lecturer if you want more exposure to students. And certainly a lot of early career faculty do that because it is a really great way to engage with the students. But I would say most often it's restricted to graduate students, because the undergraduate courses are generally taught by faculty that are primarily affiliated with the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which is the central campus. That said, I lead the undergraduate microbiology course, for example, at Yale, and we often will invite some guest lecturers from the School of Medicine to lecture even for the undergrads if they're interested and they have specific areas of expertise that are relevant. So there are a lot of opportunities in that regard. So actually we're right at 1, but we have one last question. So I guess we'll answer that one and then call it, unless people have final comments they'd like to make. Okay, so how does student recruitment work for each department? For example, School of Medicine versus main campus. Can you be affiliated with main campus for recruitment's sake? Does anyone want to comment on this question?
I can sort of explain how the immunology track works under the BBS umbrella program. So the idea of the BBS is that when students are recruited, they are affiliated with a particular track, microbiology, immunology, MCDB. There are 8 tracks in total, I think. In the immunology track, very few students switch out to a different track, even though it's allowed. And every year we would have several students that switch over from other tracks to join us. I think because immunology tends to be a more isolated thing, when you're in the immunology department, you're automatically affiliated with the immunology track, and then I work mostly with immunology students just because of the sheer amount of knowledge and technique that is required to work in my lab. But I think it really depends on your specific program, your expertise. If you want to be affiliated with a different BBS track, that's very easy. You don't necessarily have to be officially affiliated with the department to be on the track.
That's right. And I wonder, Maria, if you could offer any more insights into the students who would be coming in with computational knowledge and interests.
So I'm quite new here, so I'm also trying to find out how it works, but I can tell you what I have learned so far. So of course, in our case, the track for the relevant track for computationally oriented students is CBB, is computational biology and biomedicine. But there are other tracks where you can also get students, and you can get also affiliated with there. So there's also tracks for engineering. You will have to get affiliated to these tracks as to the graduate programs. But I don't think this is very difficult. I'm in the process of doing that, so I cannot tell you much more specifics about that. But in principle, when you can show that you have either your initial training, so in my case, I'm a physicist, so now I'm looking to get affiliated with the graduate program in applied physics. So as long as there is just an overlap in your training or your current research, so you can show some overlap in the things you are doing, it's quite easy to get associated with different graduate programs, and then you have the right to supervise students and teach courses and attract the students. So basically, summarizing, you have to get into the right graduate programs, but there are quite a few, and they are flexible to accept people from different departments. So that's quite flexible.
Okay, so I think we've answered all of the current questions, and since we're just a few minutes over time, we'll probably stop there. And thank you so much for your questions and for attending today, and then remind you to please submit your applications on time, but also email Andy if you have specific questions about your research program or some of the timing, scheduling issues or questions that came up in the Q&A. We really appreciate your time, and I also want to thank all the panelists for contributing their expertise and feedback today. All right, so everybody have a great afternoon, morning, or evening, depending on where you're logging in from, and we hope to see your applications soon. All right, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.